investing in your future, we know setting yourself up for success is critical. Brett, we're going to ask you some high level talking points dentists have for preparing for the future. But first, Dr. Patel, how did you start investing and what advice do you have for dentists to get started with investing?
So there's a lot of really good platforms out there that you can use, Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab. It's not difficult to set up an account, and starting somewhere, even if it's small, early on is way better than waiting until later. Uh, there's a lot of really good literature and kind of books out there if you have sort of really no idea of where to get started. But I would say that one of those platforms is very user friendly. Personally, we use Vanguard. I just find it the most user friendly for us. And how did I get started investing? I really kind of looked at what the doctors that were around me were doing. And, you see the outward fruits of all of our labor. You see the houses and the cars and the vacations and all those things, but what you don't see is the hard work that goes into it. And I had a lot of conversations, and pretty much across the board, all of them said we started saving and investing in whatever way that we were doing it early. Do it when you start, do it when you start your career, and don't wait. And so I think once that becomes habit, kind of like taking your vitamins or going to the gym, it just becomes habit. And then it's just kind of part of your life. And that's where I started.
Brett, we know Dr. Patel just talked to us about investing in the future and setting yourself up for success and retirement and how critical that is. What are some high level talking points dentists need to know about preparing for the future?
Yeah, that Matt, that's such an important topic. I mean, we often get a later start on wealth building with dentists because of school, residency, student loans. But the good news is that doctors in general, right, have the income potential to catch up. And I think the key is you gotta be intentional. You have to have that intention to stay aggressive. And so Dr. Patel mentioned this. I want to just echo what she said. Start investing early, even if it's small, right? Time in the market matters more than timing in the market. That's a phrase that financial advisors use a lot because we see a lot of people trying to time the market like, hey, is now a good time to invest? Should I buy this now? Should I buy that now? Should I sell this? To us, it's more a matter of just time in the market. Just continue to put money into a diversified portfolio. I wouldn't make it too complicated up front. If you're working on your first $100,000, right, you can use a variety of different low cost, globally diversified funds, right? Vanguard has a global stock market fund, the Vanguard Total Stock Market. Dimensional Fund Advisors has one, right? Fidelity has one. And so you can just start there with a global fund and not get too caught up into what you're putting money into versus not. And you're getting global exposure, international stocks, domestic stocks, large companies, small companies. You're getting all of that exposure with those funds. And that's a great way to start on your first 50, 100,000. Sure, after you get to that milestone, you can start expanding onto what funds you're utilizing, but at least you can have a nice diversified way to get there. The next item that I think is critical is understanding what different vehicles you have. So this includes Roth IRAs, 401ks, backdoor Roths, and then if you're going to be a practice owner or a 1099 associate, you've got lots of other vehicles to help offset income. You've got SEP IRAs. SEP IRAs allow you to fund up to $70,000 a year in tax deferred or Roth retirement. Simple IRAs allow you to fund $16,000 a year uh, towards the simple IRA, tax deferred. You've got solo 401ks. If you're a 1099 contractor with no employees, that would allow you to fund your 401k, which is $23,500 to the 401k. And then you have profit sharing plans, which allow you to fund an additional $46,500 on top of your 401k. And that's also tax deferred. And so those are the different retirement plan vehicles. We do have some high earning doctors that will utilize an account called a cash balance plan. And those are accounts that allow you to fund up to $350,000 a year. That is a direct offset to your taxable income. So lots of vehicles in the retirement plan world to help you lower your taxes up front. And so when we're looking at doing that, we kind of want to know that you're in a higher tax bracket. We assume you're in a higher tax bracket now than you will be in your retirement years. So it makes sense to utilize those and lower taxes now, and then pay taxes in the back end when your tax rates might be lower in retirement. So that's a few points there. I do want to mention that when you're trying to decide how much you need to save, right? Usually you're going to try to decide like when you want to retire, and most people kind of assume, I want to retire at around age 65, and they build their plan that way. I would encourage clients to aim for work optional wealth. So where you're financially secure enough to choose how and when you work, that means like whether you're 50 years old or 60-year-old or 65, right? You can kind of choose and have a plan in place to be able to scale back or to work part-time. And that's becoming more and more common for our client base. The other item is, if you're going to own a practice, you will have your practice cell that you'll be able to account for, that will be extra add-on for going into retirement. So if you want to own a practice and you're going to be able to sell it, 30 years down the road, you'll have that money in the pipeline. But if you're going to be a practice owner, I think it's super important to do something called tax loss harvesting. That's an investment strategy that you can do in a brokerage account. And you can invest in a brokerage account and tax loss harvest, meaning you'll accrue losses on the stocks that go down in value. And that allows you to accumulate losses and a tax benefit on your tax returns that will roll over year over year over year. And you can accumulate those until out into the future for like the future sale of a practice or the sale of a real estate. And you can have massive, massive impact if you start early, right? Like imagine being able to tax loss harvest 10,000 a year times 30 years, right? And offset $300,000 of the gain on the sale of your practice down the road. That would be huge, right? You'd actually get to keep a lot of that money. Otherwise, when you sell your practice, you're going to spend 30% of the practice sale is going to go to taxes, and you're going to lose a huge chunk of money. So consider tax loss harvesting and where it will fit into your strategy. That's going to come in the bucket in the taxable accounts that are outside of your retirement plan options.
I've heard the advice, for doctors, like you had mentioned, that selling the practice is not the retirement plan. But I've heard that was the pretty common mistake from a while back, was that was like the nest egg, was selling the practice. Like, what advice would you give to someone that's banking on that strategy?
Yeah, I think it's you can't rely on it. Like we just know you're not going to be able to have enough money in almost all scenarios. And so owning a dental practice is a great asset. In fact, I think it could be the best asset you may have. It gives you the cash flow, it gives you increased earnings potential, the autonomy, and your tax write-offs. But it should not be your only retirement plan, right? If you sell your practice for $1 million, you're going to pay something like $70,000 in closing costs to sell the practice. And then you're going to pay 30% of that in taxes. So on $1 million practice sale, you might keep $650,000, right? And
Wow.
what's $650,000 going to be worth, 30 years from now, right? It's not going to be enough to get you enough money to live on in your retirement years. And so it's a nice boost. We like to consider that as some icing on the cake, and maybe gives you flexibility going into retirement to not draw as much from your tax deferred accounts. But yeah, you certainly need to save above and beyond from just what you're going to get out of your practice sale. And Matt, what do you think people need to go into retirement, right? Like
Yeah.
that is a huge unknown. A lot of doctors, when we start working with them, it's like, hey, how much do you think you're going to need to retire on?
Get the
You know
crystal
what everyone
ball.
says?
Yeah, yeah.
It would be nice to have a couple million, 3 million, and they don't really know. And so, what I found is it's there's a lot that can go into that. Like everyone's going to need a different amount of money based on the lifestyle they want to have in their retirement
Right.
years.
Yeah.
But I think one of the misunderstood things, or maybe not understood, but I think people minimize the impact of inflation, right? Like if you were to invest $50,000 a year for 30 years and get an annualized 8% rate of return on that money, it would turn into $5.7 million going into retirement. So that's $50,000 invested a year. You've now got $5.7 million going into retirement. Everyone hears that number and they think, man, that's great. I can live off $5 million or $6 million. But what is that going to be able to, what lifestyle is that going to be able to provide you? Inflation essentially cuts the value of money in half about every 30 years, right? And so if you've got a $5.7 million portfolio because you invested 50K every year, and you don't want to deplete that nest egg you have, you would probably be drawing about 5% of your portfolio value. So I'm just going to get my calculator out. 5.7 million times 5% is 285. You got $285,000 to work with. What is that going to be worth in your retirement years? Well, if you divide that by 2, that's $142,000. So it would be like the equivalent of living on $142,000 today. That's like is $142,000 enough to cover your annual living costs right now? Maybe it is, but that's what a $5.7 million portfolio would give you. Yeah, you might have some social security income or some real estate or other assets, but essentially, if you take the inflation factor into the equation, it might not be as much money as you think.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one other question that just came up, you know, employers offer 401k, like we talked about, as a benefit, and often there's a 401k match. So what's your advice on, I guess, 401k? Is it max out the 401k? Is it as a minimum get the match because that is an added benefit from the employer? Or, what's your advice on where they should start with that?
Yeah, a lot of people out there are saying, hey, the 401k is dead. The 401k isn't going to give you the rate of return as your mom and dad had, right? We're not seeing that, right? If you look at it, and it goes back to the power of diversification, right? Like
Mhm.
international stocks this year, we're in July, so we're a half a year into 2025. International companies are up 20+% right now, right? And so, yeah, the US market isn't doing as great as it had been in 24 or the prior year, but there are still segments of the market that are really doing a great job right now. And so for any investor, right, the only reason we invest is because we expect return. And so I wouldn't get caught up on like, should I do 401k versus other things? If you have a 401k and there's an employer match, like you have to fund up to the match
Yeah.
if it's a match only, because you're just throwing away money if you don't take advantage of that. If your employer is going to give you money matched, like take that. But I wouldn't say stop there, right? Some people are thinking, yeah, well, I want that match money, but I'm just going to stop at what they're going to match at. I'm not a believer in that. I think if you've got money in your budget to work with, and you've got to fund the max amount of your 401k to get to that 20% savings rate, then yeah, put it there. If you're in the 24+% tax brackets. And so, yeah, I think the more critical component on like saving is take advantage of retirement plan vehicles, whether you have a match or not. And if you get a match, yeah, you can consider that maybe going towards that 20% figure that's going to get you enough money in retirement.